Lucasfilms just put out an announcement trailer for a brand new era of Star Wars. Now, this is exciting. This is something that I have been wanting for years, for Star Wars to get away from the more familiar and explore something brand new. Being called the High Republic era, we are going to see new heroes, new Jedi, and new threats. It's basically a soft reboot for Star Wars and exactly what the franchise needs right now. The timing couldn't be better. Now that The Rise of Skywalker has been released, we have witnessed the end of an era. With Episode 9, we have seen the end of the Skywalker saga, and we'll see future Star Wars movies taking on a new identity. I mean, you're a fool if you think that Star Wars was going to end after Rise of Skywalker. I know it's what all the marketing was claiming, that it was going to be the last Star Wars, but I mean, come on, who do you think they're fooling? There's literally another Star Wars movie slated to be released in 2022, and we have already started seeing rumors about what that is going to be. But before I go into the future, I want to reflect on what we have already seen. The reason why I feel the need to make this video is because after watching The Rise of Skywalker, I found myself largely disappointed. Disappointed at the movie I watched, disappointed at the overall sequel trilogy, and disappointed by the whole franchise under Disney. In 2012, when it was announced that Disney had purchased Lucasfilms from George Lucas, I was very excited. I know the prequels weren't that great despite having a soft spot for them, but I largely blame the shortcomings of those movies on George Lucas himself. Now, George is a brilliant man with far more success than I will ever see. His ability to create a world so vast and rich with lore set a foundation for a billion-dollar franchise to exist for over 40 years. But for as awesome as Lucas is, he does have his shortcomings. He does not have the best script writing skills, directing some of the most cringeworthy scenes in any movie ever. So when Disney bought Star Wars, I figured that this would be an exciting time because this meant that we could see some talented filmmakers try their hand at building off of Lucas's grand vision. While I think this could still happen, I think Disney's overall handling of the license to this point has been messy. Straight out of the gate, it was clear that Disney just wanted another money-making machine. They wanted to create something similar to what Marvel Studios was already doing for them with their cinematic universe. Star Wars' universe is incredibly vast, and the amount of lore and history provides a whole new realm of possibilities. It's so easy to create a world based in the Star Wars universe and then interconnecting separate movies similar to what Marvel has been doing. You could pick a random time period, create a central set of movies in said time period, and then build off of it. Let's look at the original Star Wars trilogy, for example. Forget about the prequels and the sequels for a moment, just look at the original three. From those films alone, you could have made a spin-off like Rogue One and Solo, or do something totally different like with The Mandalorian. All of these things are still within the same era of Star Wars, and that's just the stuff that they already did. Never mind the possible Yoda prequel, or the Boba Fett movie, or a Rebel Alliance prequel, or maybe more of a direct sequel to the trilogy to show the early days of the New Republic. Again, this is just one era of Star Wars. You could do the same for the prequel trilogy or the sequel trilogy, or as I said before, pick a whole new era and basically treat it like a soft reboot of the franchise. I'm getting a bit sidetracked, but I'm just pointing out that like Marvel, Star Wars can be just as successful and fruitful, and that's clearly what Disney wanted because as soon as they acquired the rights to Star Wars, they immediately announced in Episode 7, which we now know is The Force Awakens, and at the same time we would get a Star Wars Battlefront video game announcement. And a year later, we would see the first Star Wars spin-off in the form of Rogue One, and by the time that The Rise of Skywalker came out a few months ago, Disney released 5 movies, 4 TV shows, and 3 video games, all within a span of less than 8 years, and that's not even mentioning the near countless amounts of books and comics. So what is the quality of these things? Well, pretty much everything has been divisive. Force Awakens received relatively positive reviews, but was criticized for retreading too many of the same things that the original movie did. The Last Jedi was pretty straight down the middle, with people that liked it or people that really didn't. The Rise of Skywalker was also something that was straight down the middle in terms of those that really liked it or those that hated it. And when it comes to the games, EA was heavily criticized for their execution of both Battlefront games, only seeing a reprieve with Jedi Fallen Order being a solid single-player focused experience with great story and gameplay. So the game is a little technically challenged and could have used a bit more polish. The TV shows, which are mostly animated, sees a large portion of the fanbase going, oh, it's for kids, which isn't untrue, but personally I find that Clone Wars and Rebels are both quality products that do a good job of building out the universe, save for a few of the earlier seasons definitely being geared toward a younger demographic. As for Resistance, well, that's definitely a show for kids, and it doesn't exactly improve beyond that. But then there's The Mandalorian, which is far and beyond one of the best Star Wars products under Disney. There are good things that have happened since the acquisition by Disney. We are now starting to see some quality video games and TV shows, and there is also a new Star Wars movie set for release in late 2022. The rumor right now is that the movie will explore this new High Republic era. Taking place 400 years before the events of the Skywalker saga, this film will show what life was like during the height of power for the Galactic Republic, but from a new perspective. Instead of fighting against the Sith, which keep in mind, we learned in The Phantom Menace that it was a millennium since the Jedi and the Sith last encountered each other. Now there is a brand brand new threat. The Republic has borders and doesn't fully rule the galaxy, so there are threats that oppose them. Now, putting this new focus on new characters and plot lines isn't only exciting because it's new, it is a needed thing. One of the many recent critiques of the Star Wars franchise is that it isn't expanding the universe. It keeps sticking to the same characters and time period over and over again. That's not a bad thing per se, but every time the product follows another Han Solo or Obi-Wan Kenobi, it is basically saying that these are the only people worth following. It essentially shrinks the universe rather than expanding it. Now, with this new era of Star Wars, they can focus on new characters and show that there was someone before any Skywalker. I mean, come on, talking about exploring new time periods, there is a fan favorite era of Star Wars known as the Old Republic era. Brought on by the popular video game from 2001, Knights of the Old Republic, this too, by the way, has rumors of a remake surrounding it, which is believed to canonize the story, which makes me over the moon excited. The Old Republic era set 4,000 years before the rise of the Galactic Empire. This era brings about so many great characters such as Darth Revan, Darth Malgus, the Immortal Emperor, Bastila Shan, and one of the greatest characters of all time, HK-47.
Master, such a function in a droid is highly illegal.
Last year I made a video which was talking about remakes after Resident Evil 2's successful launch. KOTOR is an easy choice for a remake. It came out almost 20 years ago, and while the story certainly holds up, the gameplay and style are a bit aged. So getting a fresh coat of paint and bringing in gameplay similar to that of Dragon Age would go a long way. So with things looking up, with the success of The Mandalorian, Jedi Fallen Order, the promising future projects like a movie possibly set in a new era, Marvel's Kevin Feige being reported to be attached to a Star Wars project, the Kenobi series picking up steam despite its recent production stalling, and a possible remake of one of the best video games ever made, you think that the future is bright. But there is one thing about Star Wars that will always remain the same. It will always be divisive. No matter the project, there are always going to be people that are either going to really like it or really dislike it. Why? Well, I have a theory. Star Wars first released in the late 1970s with the original trilogy. Then in the early 2000s was the prequels. About 20 years later, we get the movies under Disney. Every wave of Star Wars is based within a new generation of fans. And look, Star Wars was always geared towards a younger audience. At its heart, Star Wars is for kids. That's why there are so many animated projects and toys. Also, the story itself is a fantasy story. It features knights with magic, along with queens and princesses fighting against evil dark lords. So kids that grow up watching the original movies have a different kind of fondness towards Star Wars. Kids during the days of the prequels, like myself, will have a different idea of what Star Wars should be. And the same could be said for the kids with the newer stuff. The point is, Star Wars is different to everyone. Everyone has a different definition of what Star Wars should be. Now listen, I was a kid during the days of the prequels. I had a Jedi robe and a lightsaber and everything that a kid who's a Star Wars fan would have. Okay, so I know the prequels aren't good, but I do have a soft spot for them. I love the time period just before the Empire, the height of power for the Jedi Order, the Clone Wars. I don't think The Phantom Menace is that bad. I actually like Revenge of the Sith. Now, Attack of the Clones is pretty awful, easily the worst Star Wars movie, though its final act is kind of fun to watch. The point that I'm getting at is that Star Wars is different to everyone, and that's where the divisiveness comes from. Fans of the original hate the shininess and color of the prequels, feeling that Star Wars isn't all about the Jedi. It isn't, but that's the story of the prequels. Culture back then was just a little bit more elegant and the Jedi were far more common. I'm not going to sit here and say that everything that the prequels did was good. They did kind of ruin the character of Anakin Skywalker. They cheapened the mysticism of the Force with the introduction of midichlorians. The story old Ben Kenobi tells of Anakin more or less contradicts the story we actually get. And going even more down the line in Return of the Jedi, when Leia recalls her memory of her mother, the prequels ignore this detail when Padme dies shortly after giving birth to Luke and Leia, which means that Leia would not have those memories. So more than a few times, the prequels generate plot holes in the canon. All three of those movies were poorly written, and there's no denying that. But there are things that the prequels introduced that I am actually pretty fond of. But there are some other fans that might not feel the same way. As for the sequel trilogy, there was one glaring issue with it. Its lack of a roadmap, its lack of any one plan across the three movies. Now, we would have loved to believe that the sequel trilogy had a plan when The Force Awakens came out, but we know now that this wasn't the case. Lucasfilms has Kathleen Kennedy, but she is no Kevin Feige. I'm sure that she is great at her job in other aspects, but when it comes to creating a plan and executing on said plan when it comes to the movies, she seems to be dropping the ball. Perhaps J.J. Abrams did have a plan after The Force Awakens. Perhaps he set something up for whoever came next to carry it forward. But the person who did come next, Rian Johnson, decided to execute his own plan with no consideration for whoever came after. People hate The Last Jedi, but I kind of like it. Though the casino stuff was a little dumb, except for the fact that I do like the implications of it, and I think how they handled Snoke was a bit lame, especially since, and this is a minor spoiler for Rise of Skywalker, Snoke doesn't come back in Rise of Skywalker like I theorized. I thought it would have been cool to have Snoke be Plagueis, being the true mastermind behind even the likes of the Emperor. I felt it would have been smart to have Snoke pull himself together using his vast force powers, which take a bit to get going, which explains why he didn't do it right away in The Last Jedi. And it would have been a great way to explain how each of his scars are from a previous time that he has been killed. But nope, none of that matters because Snoke is just not important anymore. The transition from one film to the next is just not good, and each movie tried to undo the last. That's all Rise of Skywalker did. A good portion of its runtime is spent trying to undo things that were done in The Last Jedi, rather than taking what was given and just make the most of it to create something that really pulls it all together. I think if Rise of Skywalker went a certain way, not only could it alone have been great, but it could have even improved on the movies that came before it. And because it doesn't do that, the whole trilogy just leaves a bad taste in the mouths of many fans. Now, in the past, I made a video about the problems with the DC movies, and one of the points that I made in the video was how as the franchise progressed, they became pretty reactionary, and rather than making the movies that they wanted to make, they gave people what they thought they wanted. Star Wars has lately done the same with recent movies, and the issue with this is that you are listening to a fan base that doesn't know what it wants. The Star Wars fan base is like a bad GPS. Lucasfilms will be at the wheel asking which turn they should take, and the fan base will be all like,
recalculating, turn right now!
Star Wars is never going to go away. It's never going to not make money, though the movies under Disney have seen a bit of a decline, with Solo possibly taking a loss after factoring in marketing, and even the saga films make less money than the previous. But Star Wars' fan base will never go away completely. For some, being a Star Wars fan is a way of life, inspiring so many, even myself, to make videos like this, to make fan films and write their own stories based in the universe. The franchise will always have that. It just needs a better focus at Lucasfilms and Disney. That's all I'm saying. The fact that the movies are slowing down with less spin-offs is a good sign, but they need renewed focus, and I think that moving forward with these new projects, it will have that. So I'm a fan that was disappointed with Rise of Skywalker and some of the more recent movies, but I am excited for the future. I don't think I will ever not be excited for a new Star Wars. And as much as I want to make a video about the issues with the franchise, I'll always still show up in the theaters for when new Star Wars stuff comes out. They'll always have my money because I'm just another mindless sheep conditioned to give money to help a billion-dollar company make even more money. But it's Star Wars, so yeah. And that's my rant. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.